Hello everyone, welcome to Mama Star X channel. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope you were able to enjoy the culmination of 2021. It was a rough year, a lot going on in 2021. And well, I decided to talk about the frequencies of 2022 because there's a lot going on this year too. And of course, for those of you who do not know me, what made me start doing these videos where I'm using these symbologies of numbers, astrology, and tarot began back in around 2027. I had played with tarot before, but not to this degree. But back in 2027, was going through a major change in my life, and I went to 2017, I started playing with tarot again. I had done it before, but I would just let it go and not, give it too much importance. But my guides told me, you have to start working with tarot. And I decided to ask them to give me a way of working with, this tool where I didn't have to go and learn from somebody or learn from a book. But that would allow me to be more practical and very specific. I'm Virgo and I have, that critical thinking where it has to make sense. So I had a few uploads where they show me through numbers how to figure out the tools, this tool. And it made a lot of sense. And it's one of the ways or one of the symbologies that we use to look at patterns, universal patterns. And little by little, I began, I had already bought an oracle of numbers and astrology, and then I was led to unite them. And at some point, I was also told that I needed to work with astrology because it was a good GPS when it came to know times where the celestial forces were working to my benefit. So I don't know, everything has just started to come together, and it was numbers who actually did it for me. So that's how, I started to work with my own style of working with these tools. After a while, then I got the other upload, and it was to pay attention to the repetition of the numbers through the month. And as I was doing that, I realized that there are portals of energy that we move through every month when we look at those numbers. So everything sort of came together, and that's what I do now. So when I talk about deciphering these codes of 2022, of course, I'm coming from my own perspective and in the way Spirit has led me to get here. So now that you know that, now you understand. And the only thing that I can ask of you is to pay attention to your emotional system, because that's your guiding system that will allow you to know if, whatever I'm saying here works for you or not. Of course, I want to give thanks to my daughter, especially my youngest one. She's a witch like me. Well, both of my kids are witches like me. And when I say witch, I'm not talking about the witch that we normally think of. I'm talking about wisdom keepers, wisdom holders, that she already began in that path of acceptance and initiation. And she inspires me a lot sometimes to just surrender more and to just let information come in without being so critical or judgmental. Yeah, believe it or not, I think there are certain things that is hard to let go, and although I do pretty good, I still need, to improve in some of my habits. But anyways, so here we are. I have on the table all the codes that relate to 2022, but I think it's important that we first understand a little bit of the frequency of the two. because this year that 2 is being repeated 3 times, but there is a pause. Okay? And that pause is just as important. So let's, understand too. So basically, this is the symbol that represents matter. Okay? So it's a state of energy that we know as matter. So we live in a reality where energy becomes form. And we manipulate energy so that it becomes form. All right? So this symbol contains a lot of information. And in numerology, when you have a number that repeats 2 times, it talks about a master number. So from one perspective, it's saying, hey, you need to look deeper into the definition of that symbol. And 2, you have to master that information. And of course, when we master information, it's not just about learning something, but it's about doing it. Because that's what we're here for. But when we have it 3 times, normally our tendency is to think that it's an angelical frequency. The universe is trying to tell us something that comes from the angel reality. But it's just another frequency that we can transmute, given that we know how. So it takes us to a whole new level of awareness that it's not just being a master of something, right? And that's what I'm going to talk about. All right. So before number 2, there are 2 numbers that exist, and there are 2 symbols that are important. And it's 0 and 1. Okay? And we have 0 here. So once I explain 0 here, you're going to understand what it means here. These 2 numbers are basically the structure of our reality. It's the structure of physical matter. Because physical matter is a hologram of the universal energy of, or you can say, or we can say, the universal mind. It's a hologram of the universal mind. Basically, everything that we see here is a reflection or an image of the energies from the universal mind. So 0, although we have not assigned any value to it, it represents the totality of our universe, or the totality of the universal mind. So although it looks like nothing, our universe looks the same. It looks like nothing, right? When we look at and observe our universe with our physical eyes, it looks like nothing. It's a void. But in that void, everything emerges, and emerges the energy of the One. And this is where this idea comes that everything that exists is an aspect of that totality. It's an aspect of the universal mind. And the energy of that universal mind is in everything that exists. And that's why we call universe. And that's why we call that energy universe. Because it's basically saying that in that one energy, there is a diversity of how it expresses itself. And this is why you're going to see certain tribes that use this symbol, the circle of life, right? You've heard that term. But then they incorporate this. The 4 elements, the 4 directions, the 4 original tribes. This symbol, they also have it in their medicine wheel. You know, when you see the medicine wheel and then it's got different colors. So it's that symbol too. But this symbol has been corrupted to look like this. And when we have a symbol that has been changed to create this harmony, every time you use that symbol in the same manner, you're contributing to that disharmony. Sorry to say that. Maybe a lot of people are not going to like that. So all the chaos that we currently have and we participate in, we contribute to it. Because we're using definitions that are out of harmony with the universal truth. Of course, it creates an experience. We get to have an experience to what that feels like. But it may be an experience that is not going to feel good. And if you are now identifying yourself with that experience as bad, you're dividing your consciousness and you're dividing your energy to create more disharmony. All right. So now that we know that this one represents the energy of the one in everything that exists, and that this circle represents all that is, we have the energy of the two, which is, like I said, physical matter. Unfortunately, this is semantics, right? In language, we have learned to identify this two line by the number 2. So now it's changed the nature of the meaning. So once we created the science of math, and especially during our evolution of how we changed to different languages and separated ourselves with languages and culture, a lot of this information has been corrupted, and that corruption confuses us and it creates more confusion. So basically, the number 2 is representing the projection that source energy, the one, created in order to expand itself, to expand its mind. Especially in these realities where we are able to change the nature of energy. And we are participating in that. So we are the beings that have been blessed enough to use the energy of source, play with it like clay, and change it and modify it and see what it feels like, because we are emotional beings and we live in an emotional planet. And we get to feel how those energies, when they change, what they feel like. So out of all the things that we hear out there, the most unique thing that us beings of light have is that we get to feel energy. Nobody else can do it the way we can. So your emotions is the operating system that allows you to feel all different kinds of frequencies, and you determine which ones feels more whole and which ones don't. Of course, in that trajectory of playing around with energy and feeling it, we became mesmerized with the light. And here's where we have forgotten that source energy has 2 sides. One where it's dark and the other one where it's light. Matter is a projection of that light. But there's a dark side to it. And that's the creative force of our universe. It's darkness. It's the void. So when we are playing around with energy in these dimensions, where we can turn that energy into matter, if we are not aware of these 2 aspects, we create imbalances. So one of the things that we have done in our evolution is become totally immersed in the light. In some ways, we've had a lot of help too. And we have forgotten of the darkness. And the thing is that you can pretend that the darkness don't exist. You know, you can pretend that that creative universal, that we all come from that creative force of the universe. We're just like it. But just because you pretend that it doesn't exist, it doesn't mean that it stops to exist. And the outcome of that is just that it gets you to manipulate energy, but it also creates a lot of imbalances. And all we have to do right now is just to observe our reality. Now, with the great shift, you know, the great shift that we're going through, this shift began in the year 2012. That's the code. Okay? And here's where we knew, you know, from a subconscious or unconscious level or conscious, doesn't matter, where there was going to be a change, a major change in our environment and in our universe. And as you could see, you have 2 representing matter. So we know that the change needed to take place in these realities of matter, of densification. But you have the 0 and the 1. See that? And then it ends in 2. So that's the code that marked the change, where we needed to start waking up and realizing who we were. Because when you only focus on one side of the truth, you're bound to come to a dead end. You're bound to create so many repetitions that you get bored. And that's basically what is happening to us. There is no growth, there is no evolution. And we are part of a bigger family that if we don't evolve, they don't get to evolve. So it's time. It's time to do it. So this great shift requires you to go through a process of integration. 1, you have to recognize who you are as part of the universal mind. 2, you have to become responsible for your messes. Then also understand that you're part of a lineage, ancestral lineage. And a lot of the messes you have right now, it comes also from those who walked before you. And 3, that you're part of a bigger family, the galactic family. Because genetically, you're not just here from Earth. You're, you know, a being also that is universal. You're multidimensional. And then lastly is that you are made of light, but you haven't even begun to really activate the capabilities of this machine that we know as body. And if we want to transcend physical matter, and then we have to get into that path or enter the path of the hero. I call it the path of the hero. I like it. I like those words because you're basically the main character of your life and your realities. And I'm not saying one reality. I'm saying realities. Because every time that you identify yourself with one aspect of the truth, you create a ripple effect in the energy reality that creates another timeline. And who do you think is going to fix that? You think somebody else is going to come and fix your mess? I know we've been indoctrinated to think that that is possible, but no. You created a mess, you got to fix it. That's what allows you to master your knowledge as a creator. It's like taking a puzzle apart and then putting it together. Now we got to put it together. We took it apart, now it's time to put it together. But to be able to put it together, it's not just about putting it together. It's about being able to know how it is that you create harmony. Being able to repeat it again and again. And here's where it comes to number 3. And we know it is this. Okay? And when you add this code, it gives you 6, which is 3 2 times. And 3 is represented by this symbol, the triangle. And another frequency that is loaded, of information. We call it in many different ways, but the Trinity basically is saying that in this reality of, where energy becomes matter, there are 2 energies that show 2 different perspectives. And the only way that we can transcend those 2 perspectives is by moving away from each point of view and looking at it from a whole new perspective. So, in other words, the only way that we can harmonize the polarities of every idea is by stopping to identify ourselves with one or the other. And we will be able to find the harmony that is needed. And that's the 3. Okay? So every idea that we work with in this reality has 2 sides. And from the moment you identify yourself with one side more than the other, you're failing to see the other side. And now you're creating a polarity. And the distance of that polarity is going to be determined by the emotions that you're feeling, as well as the judgments that you're creating. And that's okay if you want to do that. But ultimately, you're going to have to reconcile that. And that's what we're doing now. So this year, this frequency is representing the level of attainment that we need to have. But we're slow. We're not here yet. But just because we're not here yet, it doesn't mean that we cannot achieve it. There are probably a small percentage of people that are already vibrating these frequencies. To the rest, it's just like an idea. Oh, it's just a message, it's a signal. And here's where my craft comes in. I'm a visionary. I'm always a little bit ahead of the times. I've done this since I was a little kid, and I'm still doing it today. It's just part of my genetic codes. So be patient with this information, because to some of you it's going to feel like a lot of BS. But just think of that image, you climbing a mountain, and you're halfway, you haven't reached the top where it allows you to see more. I'm not saying here that I'm better. I'm just saying that I've reached a certain level of perception that allows me to see more than someone who still halfway through. A lot of times when we feel uncertain about what is possible, our tendency is to fall back into the old ways and sort of reach out to those timelines where we felt safe and where we were happy. And that's all okay if you can do that momentarily. But if you remain in that place, you're not really growing. You're just going back to what you already know. And these are times where there's so much opportunities for the unknown, because we live in a universe that is infinite. And the world that we can live in can be even better than what we did before. Then, it can be better than those timelines where you thought that it was perfect. But you got to be patient, because this process is difficult. Not everybody wants to do it. And it requires you to change your lifestyle. I'm not asking you to become a monk, and I'm not asking you to be a sage, but it does requires you to change your lifestyle and to change your way of thinking. These are very revolutionary times where we can thrive as a species, but we have to do the work first inside ourselves and remove a lot of those definitions that we have bought into that have corrupted our mind and our energy fields, so that we can become whole. And then we can activate many of our capabilities as energy beings, as beings of light. And that's what Buddha and Jesus and many of the sages that have walked through earth have been trying to tell us. We all have that capability. So let's then talk about the frequencies that these cards are showing us. So from the two perspective, when we see tarot, astrology, and numerology, in tarot is the high priestess, which is an aspect of all of us. We all have our spiritual side, we all have our creative force, and is connected to the universal creative force, and it's dark. Very powerful energy. It doesn't behave or act or operate in the same way your mind does. So right now, you need to work with that part of you, and that's something that we've been talking about now for a few years, since, all of this shift, this great shift that is taking place. The house in astrology that represents your capabilities is Taurus. So you will learn to work with your abilities, and I'm not talking necessarily about the ones that you learn in college. We're talking about your lineage. Pay attention to what your ancestors are good at and pretty consistent with. Because if you have been feeling like you chose a degree that it just doesn't fill your cup, and then investigate about what your ancestors were good at, because that's where you're going to find your truth. Now these two, when we bring it into the code 20, it's talking about Uranus in astrology. In tarot is judgment, and in numerology is talking about exhaustion. So when we're dealing with these frequencies of expansion that are so different and foreign to us, we need to be very mindful about the frequencies that we work with, because we're making better connection with the unknown, and we have this misconception that the unknown is perfect and is heaven and all spirits are good, and they're not. There's a lot of energies that are also confused. Of course, once again, from the universal perspective, it's just another experience that is having through us. But we are masters creators when it comes to reducing the light. We have so many timelines that we've created about adjusting our light into nothing. Believing that we're just as victims of the universe, that, the universe made a mistake with us. We're powerless. So, yeah. In the non-physical, there's all kinds of energy, but of course, ultimately, in this time of change, you want to be able to access some of these newer frequencies, and one of the things you need to do is pay attention to what your body's telling you. A lot of times, we are so ingrained in our own habits and in our own way of doing things that we set our priorities in a way that sometimes goes against our health. And when you are going through this change, your physical body has to adapt to that change. And the way it does it is through your genetic operating system. You know, your genes have to change, genetic codes. And sometimes that's not easy. So if you're feeling that you need to rest, even though you have a to-do list, you need to go and rest. With the 22 code, this master number comes intuition, Pluto, and the High Priestess, okay? 2-2, because we don't have a major arcana in tarot that is 22. So I decided to use the 2. So basically what it's saying here is that, you know, we have a lot of hang-ups about death. And we need to work that out. Because you cannot change your point of views and you cannot evolve unless you go through a death. You cannot destroy energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. But the nature of energy does change. And that's why we're here. And that's what we're contributing to, changing that energy through our manipulations. So when you are working with your inner being or your emotions, you need to be patient, especially when you're letting go of the past, especially when you're purifying yourself and your ideas. Because there are parts of you that are dying. You no longer are going to need them. Okay? That's why with the 22, we get the code 4. Astrologically, is the house of Cancer. Your emotions is ruled by the moon. Numerology says perseverance, and in tarot is the Emperor. And the Emperor is the masculine side of our energy. But you know, once again, you know, removing the corruption of what we know. The Emperor does not represent somebody who's corrupted. That happened later. Originally, to become an emperor, you would have to go through a whole entire process of purification. Body, mind, spirit, to transcend a lot of those belief systems that will limit you. Transcend your ego so that you can master consciousness. So you can become a master of your own life and your own destiny. So it's really talking about a level of awareness that allows you to have the authority to manipulate the elements at a whole different level. And that's what that card represents. But the divine masculine, without its divine side, is incomplete. So your ideas without your emotions is incomplete. So Cancer represents your emotions, the divine feminine. The Emperor represents your masculine side, your ideas. So be patient when you are now in this path trying to materialize some of the ideas that you have about, you know, these new frequencies. It's not easy. It's possible, but it's not easy. And then the last code is 6. So we see that repetition of number 3 that I talked before, that level of harmony. So harmony is also important in this process when we are recognizing our own power and our own capabilities. In tarot is the energy of the lovers, and in astrology is the house of Virgo. It's funny because, Virgo is represented by the Virgin. Like a virgin. We all virgins. But we have this tendency of think of a virgin, of somebody who's untouched, right? Normally it's associated with our sexuality. But it represents something that has not been touched. So when we think of Virgo, we think of health, we think of work. And sometimes I ask myself, how did that came to be? A representation of a virgin, something that has not been touched, to be the house of health and work. All right, so for me, it represents fertility. And it's just like when you take the soil and prepare it because you are planning to plant very special seeds, new seeds that are very special to you. The soil has to be right. So when we are going through this change, which is a big one, and we are trying to master certain qualities, which is a big thing, and we're trying to take it to the next level, we need to prepare the ground. And that's why one of the ways that is very helpful is when you stop identifying yourself with all the definitions that you normally use to address your reality. Okay? And this is a path that requires devotion, perseverance, patience, and the desire to succeed. And that's what Jesus and Buddha, again and again and again, they did. So basically what they were telling us was, hey, you can do what we're doing. The question is whether you want to do it. Do you want to do it? We're so distracted by matter. So much distraction. Material possessions that keeps us distracted. But the lovers here, right? For those of you who naturally, or normally look at this card and say, oh, love. I'm looking for my romantic partner and I want the ideal person. Who doesn't, right? Who doesn't want the ideal person? Well, this is the card, and I remember making a video about this where I talk about what this symbol really truly represents. So here it's talking about the energies within you, right? Because you also represent the universal truth. And there's two aspects of you. And not until you learn to transcend those two aspects that you don't become divine. I mean, you're divine, but you start working with your divinity, in other words. So if you cannot be that frequency, it's impossible for you in this physical reality where everything is a mirror of who you are internally to have it. I had to think that for a moment. So everything that happens to us is a reflection of the frequencies that we're vibrating internally. So how can you expect to have the ideal partner when you yourself have not reached that level of being? Because it's not about thinking it, it's about being it. That's what we're here for. I know this is a lot. This is a lot of information. And I'm telling you, sometimes I don't even know how this happens, because these are things that just come through me in the moment. And yeah. So all the work that we did in 2021, okay, so it's a lot of work. And as you could see, 2021 was pretty chaotic. A lot of times I see people that they just don't know what to think, or they don't know what to do. And of course, if you don't understand your own power, it's very easy to give it away. And it's also very easy to be manipulated by information that is more chaotic. So we have 2021. Look at the codes. Look at that. So once you start understanding the meanings of this code, you start like, oh, look at that. There's the zero, right? Acknowledging the totality of our reality and our universe. And the one, because, the one energy, we represent that same energy. So in a way, we're little miniature universal minds manipulating energy. Having these experiences here, it's fun. It's fun and it's not, because sometimes it's not so fun, is it? Especially if we are totally clueless and unaware of who we are. So folks, we have more work to do this year. We are already meant to be vibrating these frequencies, as I said before. And, there's a lot of us that are nowhere near to that. I think there's a small percentage of beings that are already doing that, but we may not know them, because if we don't have the level of consciousness to recognize them, they can cross our path and you won't see them. Masters, they're emperors, they're incredible creators. So, we have to do our best and be very selective about the information that we're going to let in, and how we are going to let other people influence us. Because right now it's really easy to be distracted with all the drama and all the confusion. And, those of us who have a better understanding of the change, we still suffer from the same challenge. We still have to look at the mess. But, it's just about how we're holding our own power. How are we holding to our own truth? I myself recently got sick, and it was just one of the ways that my soul wanted me to understand another level of COVID. Interesting enough, I tested myself and it was negative, but I had the experience of what COVID was about. And it's not that I didn't have COVID before. I had it 2 years ago, but from my perspective right now, I needed to understand something that I didn't before, especially when I work with people. And it's just amazing, it's just one of those frequencies and vibrations that can allow you to cleanse a lot and help you make you feel lighter. So whether you get COVID or you get just a simple cold, or maybe you are dealing with some sort of ailment or disease, it's just one of the ways that your body needs to release a lot of that toxicity, that emotional toxicity that you are you've been holding on to, or that you're holding on. And believe me, once you're able to change it or transform it in whatever way you choose to, it's going to feel better. So thank you guys. If you have any additional question after listening to my video, please let me know. My next video, as I said, it would be about Virgo and what are the portals of this month and what are the houses that are going to be affected. The best of luck to all of you. Thank you.